Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. We have a lot to get to this morning, and we're going to jump right in. First of all, as a reminder, we will have Brooks Baker in as our guest, Steuben County District Attorney. He's going to join us a little bit later on, so it's not too late to get that information to me. If you have any questions whatsoever, there is the text number or call, and then you have the email as well. And the last few days, I've received wonderful texts, wonderful calls, wonderful emails. We're going to get to a couple of those in just a second, but you can always send in questions for our guests. Tomorrow, former Congressman Tom Reed will be on the program. So let's get to our text messages and emails from the last few days. We'll start here. John from Hornell, and this is what we kicked off the program with yesterday. John said, and I thought this was a very good point, though the stadium looks nice, this is in reference to the renderings of what the new Buffalo Bills stadium is going to look like, or we presume is going to look like. Why should taxpayers chip in $300 million? Yes, and Erie County giving even more, but that's us as taxpayers of New York State, $300 million. The state is broke, and yet we are giving billionaires this kind of money. Another great point. When it is finished, I hope someday I will be able to afford a ticket to attend a game. I couldn't agree more. That's one of the concerns I brought up yesterday. We've seen it with other stadium projects in other states as well, but especially New York, where when it's all said and done and it's finally finished, we are struggling to afford to buy a ticket to the game that we helped pay for the stadium. So there's been a lot of criticism of the Buffalo Bills stadium and how much Hochul gave to, I assume, the Buffalo Bills themselves, not the NFL. So I thought that was a great text, so thank you for reaching out. I want to get right to that because we started the program yesterday with the photos of that stadium. We have a couple other emails, a couple other texts, which will actually tie in beautifully with the main topics that we've had the last few days, and that's the budget negotiations going on in Albany. There's a few there. A couple things here about our utility bills. That's been a major theme throughout this program because we learned that we'll see even higher bills because of these green energy initiatives that we'll be paying for by fees and different surcharges. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Oh, you know what? I do have time for, let's go to one other text before we go to break that I received, and I thought this was in reference to yesterday's program. We had a poll that showed Americans, and it's very sad, I mean, it is plummeting, are losing the values that defined us from the beginning, that we don't have as much faith in faith. We don't have as much belief in patriotism. We don't have as much commitment to community. It's troubling. It is, I think we're seeing it throughout pop culture. We're seeing it with some of the tragedies recently that we've had throughout the country. So when I come back from break, I'll read you what one of our astute viewers had to say about that. But I don't want to run too late this morning. We're going to talk about, again, bail reform. We're going to talk about the budget process, and we also have a few things here at the national level. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. Yes, you saw it right. We just got our first wave of the morning. There on the bottom of the screen if you're new to the program. When people walk by our beautiful studios on Market Street and they wave, we add to the wave counter. Just another way we're making it interactive. So let's take that short break, and then we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. As I mentioned, we're broadcasting from Market Street in the Hesselson's studio. Another text in reference to yesterday's program, as I was saying, excuse me, we had that polling that was very disheartening, suggesting something as important community. Many of you volunteer in the community. Many of you realize the importance of that bond that communities have. People losing faith in religion, or not putting as much emphasis on patriotism. And again, I think you see it in pop culture. I think the media is pushing that as well. And that's what our next viewer had to say. Let's go to the text message. Oh, that's the wrong one. We're going to get to that one in just a little bit. And there we go. So this is Patriot. This person calls themselves Patriot in Savona. I still believe that the American people value faith, patriotism, and community. I think the media uses polling like this to discourage us. It's another way they can divide us. I'm assuming, meaning the media. And that's I think a very, very astute point, because the media for a long time, some in academia, have been pushing a narrative that this country isn't that great. And to you and I, that is wrong. It's just not the case. We are a great nation. And as that's being forced upon people, whether it's on a movie you watch, a TV show you watch, or if you're a young person going to school, it wears on you. You start to, and I think that's what this polling shows in the back of people's minds. Well, maybe I won't fly the flag this July 4th, or maybe I'm not going to join that board or that charitable organization. Because why? I think the media and many of the powers that be do use polling like this, and do use the power of persuasion to continue to keep pushing people to believe that this is not a great nation, or to discourage people's faith. And overall, it's a troubling trend that has led to a lot of the tragedies that we've seen just recently in Nashville. I think it's what's led to this selfishness and this. Well, we could tie it in if I really wanted to make a stretch, but I don't know how big of a stretch it is. If we wanted to tie it in with when we see budgets, whether at the national level or at the state level, where it is, well, the money is never going to run out. We can keep spending, because my time here is the most precious. That's why I don't have to worry about my community so much. I have to focus on myself, me. And that's that selfish attitude that I think that polling is illustrating. But to that viewer's point, I think the media, and I've never been a firm believer in polling anyway, but I think it's a way for those in power to divide us even more, where we say, well, maybe I will just stay in. Maybe I'm not going to go to that board meeting, or I'm not going to go to that city council meeting, or I'm not going to join some type of charitable organization. It is heartbreaking to see polls like that. If you want to put your full faith into it, again, I would say take it with a grain of salt. So there we go. That's covering a few of the great texts, great emails that we received the last few days in there. If you want to be a part of the program, I can't guarantee we'll be able to get to all of them. I cherry pick a little bit, but there is my contact information, and also I'll be checking that right before we go on the air with Steuben County District Attorney Brooks Baker, which is coming up in just a little bit. So stay with us. We have to take a short break, and then we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Quick story to get to before we speak with our guest, and it ties in, and that's why I wanted to get to it before, because we'll be having a conversation with Steuben County District Attorney Brooks Baker. This is looking at a story from the Post this morning. New Yorkers want thugs to face bail, but the more progressive in Albany won't listen. This coming from the New York Post editorial board. Siena College did a poll again. I'm not the biggest fan of polls, but I think this speaks to why Lee Zeldin was so successful in his race for governor, because the people of this state are sick of criminals being coddled, right? 72% of New Yorkers statewide support the move to allow judges more discretion on setting bail for dangerous crooks. And this is kind of fascinating when you look at what's happening in Albany as compared to what's happening on the street. 76% of Democrats, who actually clocked higher on this than independents and even Republicans, backed this change. And it's not a huge change that Governor Hochul is proposing, but it's a step in the right direction. It allows judges more discretion on setting bail for these dangerous criminals. Support is at least above 60% across every single demographic category: rich, poor, black, white, Hispanic, male, female. it is above 60% wanting this change. And going back to the point about how well Lee Zeldin did, New Yorkers, 92% of New Yorkers consider crime a very or somewhat serious problem statewide. Well, the issue with crime is not you have to wait for the media to tell you about it, or you have to be told about it. You've probably experienced it, or you know someone, family or friends, who have experienced it as well. So I guess it's a no-go, though. In Albany, the far left and the left in Albany are kind of fighting over money now, about how much we're going to spend and who we're going to get it from, etc., going against Hochul. But they're pretty clear that bail reform, or however you want to say it, is dead in the water. And the New York Post, again, editorial board, is suggesting that if Hochul has to fight this until it's well over the due date, which is April 1st, which isn't looking that great because it's pretty quiet in Albany right now, but if she has to fight it and it's a delay, the later the better, in the New York Post editorial board's mind. And I would agree. Keep fighting it. I hope that Hochul stands strong on this. I have my doubts because there'll be so many moving pieces of I want this, I'll cave on this, etc. And again, I asked the question, will we make that April 1st deadline? I have my doubts. We're coming up on a short break. Coming up, and I see him outside now, coming to the studio, Brooks Baker, the Steuben County District Attorney. So let's take that short break, and we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program where we have an interview, and we're being joined this morning by Steuben County District Attorney Brooks Baker. Good morning. Thanks for coming on the show.
Morning, Frank. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, this is TV. This is exciting.
It is very exciting. No question about that.
Welcome to show business.
Yeah, thanks.
So tell us, you're Steuben County District Attorney, and we just followed up on a story that we've been talking about for the last, this is almost 2.5 weeks of the show, yep. And that's bail reform. So let's hit the ground running, and you tell us.
Bail reform is a nightmare. Mm-hmm. It is probably the worst thing that's happened for criminal justice and public safety in New York State in my 30 years in the business. It really is terrible. It was the idea that we should be fair across the board and that people shouldn't be held in jail just because they're indigent certainly makes inherent sense. And there were people who were being held that way, right. But not here.
Right.
There were problems in Rikers Island, New York City, mm-hmm. and as usual, the legislature, our friends in Albany, decided to fix the downstate problem by massacring the entire upstate New York area. Right. But what bail reform has done is it's hurt everybody. Mm-hmm. One of the things we haven't emphasized how much it hurts defendants. Mm-hmm. Someone who's accused of a crime traditionally here in upstate New York and in Steuben County, if they're accused of a felony, they might spend a night or two in jail.
Right.
It might be a come to Jesus moment for them. A lot of those folks we could then engage in drug and alcohol treatment. They would be in front of a judge. They'd know it's serious. They'd stop.
Right.
And they get an opportunity sort of for a reset. And most of those folks with early felonies be looking at probationary or alternative sentences or our drug courts and things like that. Lives were saved. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have people who are overdosing and dying while they're out on bail reform. We actually have to have a category for that now in our record-keeping system. It's happening so frequently. But those folks are also racking up more felonies because they don't believe there's any sanction for what they do. Mm-hmm. So by the time they get into our system, they're not looking at a probationary alternative sentence. They're looking at going to state prison for a really long time. So it's hurt them, and then of course public safety has just been awful. People are committing, when we used to have people commit 1 or 2 felonies, maybe now I'm seeing 10 or 15. People aren't safe. I have to explain to people that for the first time in my career, which again now goes back almost 30 years, I had to say to people that they're less safe than they were last year, which is just disturbing. We have people laughing at police officers, and it's really, really frustrating.
We talked about it with both Chemung County Sheriff and Steuben County Sheriff,
yep.
that why would people join the police force now when you don't just have criminals getting pushed into this even, you know, but you also have the media attacking them constantly.
Well, it's not just the media; it's also the New York State Attorney General.
Well,
I mean,
right,
the specter that's out there for law enforcement is disturbing. We have great people in law enforcement in Steuben County. One of the reasons I became a lifetime and career prosecutor is because I got to work with law enforcement. The people here are so phenomenal, so dedicated to the public safety across the board. But I now see great people leaving before they would have. They're retiring at 20 years and leaving as fast as they can because of the media culture where no matter what they do, it's bad, where people have no respect for them because the media enforces the idea they should not have any respect for them. And then when they make a mistake, the Attorney General looks over their shoulder, and like what happened with the Oropalo case over in Elmira, they jump on things that maybe aren't enough for any kind of prosecution and go after them. So it really is it's a tough climate to get people to do a very tough job.
And going back to your point on bail reform, the thing that maybe disturbs me the most is how many victims there's been since this was enacted that did not need to be victims.
Oh, there's no question. We've had, unfortunately, one fatality here in Steuben County because of it. We had a drunk driving case where a defendant was arrested. He fought with the police. Traditionally, bail would have been set. However, it was a drunk driving case, not bail eligible at that time, and he was released. 2 weeks later, he killed somebody in a drunk driving crash.
That's horrible.
He's now serving a very long state prison sentence. His life is gone, and one person's life is gone. 2 other people were badly hurt. Terrible, tragic situation. Again, that's our bail reform.
Yeah.
We've had rapes occur with people out on bail reform, and lots of property crimes and assaults. It is the worst thing for public safety that I can ever have imagined.
Yeah, and you look at some of these cases where people are out back on the streets before the adrenaline's worn off or the anger for that issue, so they're going back and doing the same thing they were doing hours before.
Well, and particularly things like domestic violence cases where they really are as you mentioned, adrenaline driven. Those folks, they go down. If their timing is right, they can be out before the police are back to the station, and then they're back in front of their victim with nothing between them and the victim but a piece of paper, and that's just not enough.
In your offices, how do you overcome that? Because it must be such a blow to morale.
It has been difficult on morale. We've had a couple of people leave. I know that across the state, a lot of my friends who are DAs have decided to leave the profession. If they can retire, they are, because it just isn't. We can't do for our communities what we are supposed to do. We have our job to do. We do justice. We still meet with our victims. We work hard for our people. And obviously the drive to be a prosecutor still exists, and a lot of people just like the drive to be a police officer is still out there.
And that's a perfect way to segue to my next question. You're up for re-election this year. Why did you decide to run for re-election?
Well, I caught the bug from John Tunney a long time ago. And the idea of getting up every day to do justice and do the right thing is hard to beat. As you know, I worked in Tom Reed's firm in private practice for a brief period of time, and I went right back to being a DA because I think that it gets in your blood. It's the same reason police officers get up every day to do what they do. Only what I do is a whole lot easier. Nobody shoots at me. But I think there's a lot of work that's undone here. I love the people of Steuben County. The promise I made when I started was to keep this the same place that I was lucky enough to grow up in, and that their children are growing up in. And that's what I want to do. Is I've still got children running around here. I want to make sure that this is the same place when I leave it that it was when I got here.
So you still have things that you want to work on?
Oh, there's no question. There are things we can do. We are in the middle of, in fact, I'm announcing on Monday what I'm calling the SOAR program, which is an outreach program for victims of domestic violence and for folks who are sort of slipping through the cracks and who we are having some law enforcement contact with, but we're not getting them enough services. So we're going to try a new multidisciplinary program that will reach out to people and try to bring services to those people and keep our victims in a better place while they go through a very difficult time.
That's great because, again, not really going back to bail reform, but just in general, there seems to be so many problems. You can maybe blame it on COVID, you can blame it on, but with addiction, with abuse, and it's a trying time for a lot of people.
I mean, addiction right now is, well, the combination with COVID, with people being locked in, it really was difficult for folks with mental health, and obviously mental health and addiction run hand in hand. We know that now. But the other thing, the other stressors, the economy is not good. The dollar isn't going as far, and that stressor always, economic stress creates stress in families, creates domestic violence, creates the need to do drugs and need to escape, and so all of those things are adding up. And now unfortunately, since borders have opened up to our south, the flow of drugs into our communities is amazing. The amount of fentanyl we are seeing, the amount of methamphetamine that's manufactured other places is stunning, and there is an availability of cheap and incredibly deadly drugs out there right now that is it's flat out scary.
And it's troubling after talking to both sheriffs when you look at people that were taking drugs that didn't even realize fentanyl were going to be in those drugs.
Oh, there's no question. That's almost everything is adulterated with fentanyl right now. We have seen people taking what they believe is methamphetamine overdose and die. We have seen people we've had a marijuana case where someone was wrapped around a tree in their car. Granted, smoking marijuana and driving is illegal.
Yes,
100%
illegal.
Drugs may be, the marijuana may be legal, but driving on it is not. But he had no idea he'd taken fentanyl, and they had to bring Narcan in and bring him back, or he would have died. And so there are all kinds of pills out there that people think are safe, that look like prescription pills, being produced by pill mills and other folks who are willing to make a buck on risking people's lives. And fentanyl is what's going in. All of them are carfentanil. We've seen some of that now too. So.
And thank God for Narcan, but it's so troubling that we have to talk about it so much, and you're training everybody pretty much how to use it, because that's how deadly these fentanyl overdoses have become.
Oh, and how common. In the first 20 years I was a prosecutor here, we didn't see an overdose. Maybe one or two. They were very, very rare creatures. But now it is, like I said, we have a line because so many people die of overdoses while charges are pending. And it's not just people who are charged with crimes. No. I've been to funerals for children and friends. It's happening to good families. It's happening to poor families and rich families. Drugs don't discriminate. They kill everybody.
No. Wow. So there must be quite amount of stress in your position.
There is a little
I'll say
bit.
You
yes,
don't have to say it, but it does seem like that's because you have so many different avenues you have to go down every day. There's so many troubling aspects out there.
Well, that's one other thing that keeps the job fresh every day. Is there's always something different, but there was always something new on the horizon. Every time we seem to sort of get our hands around a problem, a new one pops up.
Yeah.
But it is, again, working with great people like Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard, like members of our law enforcement community, Chief Kenzie Spalding here in Corning, our folks in Hornell, the people I work with in DA's office, our judges, even our public defenders. The whole group is aimed at public safety, and people don't understand that. It's a very cooperative working group.
Was it difficult when the restrictions loosened on COVID for catch-up, or how did you guys handle that during the time of COVID?
Well, COVID, we never really shut down. We were always working. We worked remotely for a while. Our office was open throughout the process. Okay. We were still able to move some cases. We were actually able to do some remote court, which was nice. We weren't able to do trials or things like that. So we do end up with a long trial backlog. Right now, they brought a fourth judge down for us. We always have three in Steuben County. Judge Cook is back with us. He's a former Steuben County ADA, so it's nice to see him back in Steuben County, handling about 25% of our criminal caseload. So we're very, very busy right now trying to make up for COVID, and we'll probably be another year making up for COVID. We had to run double grand jury sessions and a bunch of other things to catch up with cases. So it was vexing. This created a backlog. It's kind of the elephant working its way through the snake. It's going to be a while.
How difficult is it to find jury members now?
It's extremely difficult.
Yeah, I would think so.
One, I think something about COVID, just getting people to show up
to anything,
to anything is difficult. And people have to remind you, it's a crime if you don't show up for jury selection.
Right.
We have never done that before, never charged people. We have had to send the sheriff out and knock on doors in recent times to bring jurors in when we run short of people on a panel. So attendance seems to be creeping back up again. People are kind of renormalizing their lives and understanding you have to show up again, but it's been difficult.
That is your civic duty, but I think COVID changed a lot of that.
Oh, there's no question.
I've got to take a short break. Can you stay with us?
Certainly.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services interview. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Somebody turned down our music there. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, and we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. Our guest, Steuben County District Attorney Brooks Baker. Thanks for staying with us through the breaks.
Oh, thanks, Frank, for having me back.
All right. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about bail reform. That comes as no surprise to people that watch the show because it's everybody's main topic.
No question. It's a pervasive issue for law enforcement and public safety.
Mm-hmm. Is that the biggest issue that you face on a day-to-day basis?
I think there's no question that it is. There's an economic side of that people don't think about. when somebody commits a serious felony, our job is to bring them to justice.
Right.
And if they do something very serious, often they'll flee the state. We are now extraditing people at a rate we have never done before, and those extraditions cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 per person. And the frustrating part is we've had long extraditions for places like Oklahoma or Mississippi. We brought folks back only to have them promptly released by another judge on a least restrictive means rule. Because once you can even set bail, they have to set it as low as possible. So it's costing taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars every year. Our jails are full back up again because people are not appearing for court as they're supposed to. And then there's a bail jumping charge that goes with it, and we can set bail on that one.
Well, that's good. That's good. But if you're the criminal, you're thinking, I got out before the paper was, or the ink was dry on the paper.
Right.
Why return? It almost seems like a free pass.
Well, and the scary thing is it is a free pass because now we have to call them and ask them.
Yeah.
They get multiple adjournments. So if you're running, you're going to get a couple of months to run before we can even go after you. We have to give them 3 chances not to appear. Only then can the court issue a warrant. Only then the warrant's got to be under the least restrictive means, so the lowest bail they can possibly set. It's such a pro-criminal piece of legislation, and it's taken all the discretion away from our judges, which is one of the really scary things.
Which we elected those judges.
Well, we elect those judges. Those judges make life and death decisions every single day.
Yes.
They decide if your healthcare proxy is any good, and who decides your life.
Right.
They decide on a life sentence at the end of a trial, but they can't decide whether or not someone is a threat to the community or they're going to return for a prosecution, so they can be held for 30 days or until a hearing happens.
I think a lot of times people suggest that these are just talking points from Republicans, that it's not that bad. But when you hear what you're put through on a day-to-day basis, this isn't hype. This is what you're going through.
Oh, this is real. This is absolutely real. And it's not just for Republicans. Anybody in New York State, whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, it doesn't matter. You're feeling the effects. Whether it's your tax bill going up, it's your police officers flying around the country to pick people up, whether it is your neighbor's house being broken into for the third time by the same guy, whether it's your car being stolen because we released somebody from the jail at their arraignment piece and they couldn't walk home, so they stole a car and went home, which has happened in Steuben County, by the way. There is, or whether it's somebody dying by a drunk driver who should be behind bars, or in New York State we've seen people shot and stabbed by those folks. This is not a talking point. This is really a critical juncture for New York State, and it's put us in a very, very difficult position for law enforcement, and we're not safe. That's the hard part.
And I think that's what's interesting or unique about this specific issue, because the media or the talking points from the other side can keep being thrown at us, but I don't know anybody that hasn't been affected by this in some way or the other.
Oh, there's no question. And if you haven't, look around and ask your neighbors, because they have. I mean, whether it's somebody who works in a store and there's a burglary there, and those people can come walk right back in the next day, or it's a domestic violence case, or it's a drug case, or it's a property crime, it doesn't matter. Everybody is affected. I'd say it's the Kevin Bacon within 7 degrees thing. Right. It's a lot closer than that.
It's a lot closer. Is this something that when you're on the street or you go somewhere, that's probably the number one topic people bring up?
There's no question. Every time I talk to the media, every time I talk to my neighbors, is it really this bad? Is it, why can't you do something about it? Right. And I've been, one, I don't get to set bail. I can recommend it.
Right.
But the rules for bail are so strict now. And you ask our judges, and they are incredibly frustrated because, again, most of those people have a ton of experience. They understand all the realities. They're all about being fair and protecting rights, and they can't protect anybody's rights.
No. And it's almost as if they're speaking against the judges themselves, suggesting that they don't have the smarts to do this in some way when they are more than qualified.
That's correct. I mean, you end up with some legislators in Albany who have never sat with a victim, who have never been to a crime scene, who have no idea what somebody who has been affected by domestic violence goes through. They have been legislators for a couple of terms, and have never had any. They've never read a law book. They've never been trained in these things. They don't worry about what the Constitution really says, what people's rights are, and they have decided that they have more knowledge about the law and about public safety than professionals who've been doing it for decades.
And I still, and I've brought this up I think every single time, I just don't understand what their end game is on this. I mean, if it's to show compassion, it's not compassion for the victims.
No, we have become the most defendant-driven state in the country, which is shocking. For a long time, we were really enforcing. We have a Victims' Bill of Rights in New York State. Victims' rights were a key hot topic for a very long time. We weren't giving victims enough time. We weren't giving them enough role in the system. Now they have none.
Right.
Absolutely none. They have, with one swing of the pen, Governor Cuomo absolutely eliminated the victim's voice in the criminal justice system, and it's shocking. We reversed, I don't know, 15 or 20 years of real progress in that area.
And if you look at the budget negotiations in Albany, when you have Governor Hochul just wanting to make minor changes, not even go far enough, and it's ignored completely. And I was looking at polls today, I think it was Siena that came out, it's something like 76% of even Democrats want to change, you know, if that's the way you want to look at it, Republican and Democrat. But overall, it's overwhelming, hence the reason why Zeldin did so well, that people want change.
I think there's no question. I think Zeldin is a great example of that. I mean, I think when Governor Hochul, who is about as pro defendant as we're going to find in a governor in the country, is out there saying we've gone too far.
Recognizes
that should be a red flag for everybody. We have. I think it's demonstrative of how absolutely tone deaf. I hate to say it, but it's primarily downstate Democrats have become. They've got control and they're going to do whatever they want, and they're catering to a constituency that. Well, they're going to make sure they can vote for him.
Right.
And that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes to show you, and we've always said it, that elections have consequences. And when there's a supermajority, they have no concern. That's why right now we see the left fighting the left against Hochul.
Right. And that's it is. It's a very strange world we're living in right now. It is
very weird.
But it's one that's making it so much worse for us across the board.
It really is. So we mentioned earlier that you are running for re-election, and it's this year. How's the petition process going?
I think it's going pretty well.
The best time of year, right?
Yeah.
So what would you like to see improved if you get re-elected?
Well, I mean, bail reform is a screaming issue.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some reallocation of resources. Right now, the state is sending a ton of money down for our public defenders, which is wonderful. But we're not spending money on things where we need to. Right. We need to spend some money on mental health. There is no question. I would love to see us. That's a driver in so much what we do. It drives a lot of the drug addiction and those things. I'd like to see that change. I'd like to see us change how we treat law enforcement across the board. I don't know how we accomplish that, but it's a noble profession. The folks I know who work in that profession are absolutely dedicated to public safety, to protecting and serving. They run into fires. They jump into rivers. They do things that when you and I would run away, they run too. And that needs to change. This thing from Albany where we're hunting police officers is just wrong.
It's wrong. Look at what the tragedy that happened in Nashville the other day. The body camera they're showing with those police officers rushing in.
Yeah,
it was terrifying to watch the body cam of that, let alone be that person.
Exactly. And that's we just went through a whole program to equip our school officers to be able to do that and respond right now in recognition of that situation.
Right. Well, it's scary times in New York. We shouldn't be all doom and gloom. You got any good news?
Good news.
Not
a whole lot this week. I'm sorry, Frank. Give me a minute.
No, I put you on the spot.
You did. Thank you.
No. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I hope we can do this again soon, okay?
I appreciate it, Frank. Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thanks again so much to Steuben County District Attorney Brooks Baker for being in on the program. And that was the M.A. Neal Financial Services interview portion. Tomorrow on the show, Congressman Tom Ree. We look forward to speaking with him. I haven't talked to him in a little bit. We're going to find out how things are going now that he's out of Congress and find out what he's been up to. So that'll be a fun little interview tomorrow at 7:20. We've got some other really exciting interviews on the docket. I mentioned yesterday that Dwayne Eddy will be on the show soon. I will keep you updated on that. I had mentioned that we received quite a few emails and texts, and this ties in with the budget because we're going to jump into the budget next before we call it a day here. But we received, and it was a email, and you can always contact me. But this email, and what this is on your screen, it's really fascinating because we talk about the fees for utilities. And one of our astute viewers was looking at their bill, and they found this thing called a weather adjustment fee. So, like many of us have done this winter, you cut back, right? You didn't want to get that costly bill, as everything else is so expensive. You don't want to keep pushing it, right? And then you look at the bottom of the bill, and it says, and they sent me a picture of it, weather adjustment. It moderates natural gas bills during any extreme weather between October 1st and May 31st. So only 6 months. Okay. If temperatures during the billing period are colder than normal, customers typically receive a credit. If temperatures are warmer than normal, customers receive a charge. So suggesting that we would ever see any kind of money back is, I think, the most fantastical part of this. But it's, and the viewer made a really good point. It'd be like if you went to the grocery store and you consistently bought 2 gallons of milk. 2 gallons of milk. And then you decide one day I only need 1 gallon, or I'm going to cut back. I don't have the money for 2 gallons. And you get 1 gallon, and the grocery store says, okay, we're going to charge you this fee because it's not what you typically use. Is this because of the surcharges that we talked about earlier on the program today and in the past? Is it because of the green initiatives? That's a great question. I'm not positive of that. I think we're going to see a lot more fees and charges on our utility bills because of those initiatives that just aren't capable yet. I know a lot of Republican talking points on it. It seems like Democrat talking points are we got to go all green as soon, like now. Many Republicans have, let's make it a prolonged journey where we're still doing the way we are now with fossil fuels, and then we slowly get to where the technology, and not even slowly, pretty quickly get to where the technology is better, more reliable for these various green projects. But when you rush it, like we're seeing in New York, that's when you start to have the major fees, the major costs, and really the outrageous threats of taking away our gas stoves. I see now at the national level they were talking about getting rid of air conditioners. It always seems to affect the ones that struggle the most, those in poverty, those maybe that don't have the means to just completely retrofit their house or change their house because of the whim of Albany or the whim of the federal government. So I thought that was kind of an interesting point, as we've been talking about that all week, about the weather adjustment charge. They keep getting us in New York, don't they? Let's take another short break. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up. A couple more quick news stories. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Talking about all the state issues. As always, you can contact me if you'd like to weigh in. We've had the opportunity, a little time today, to read a few of those emails and a few of those texts, and I really appreciate it. I always like to hear from you, the viewer. Let's take a quick story, side story here. So Albany's budget mess is just one reason why New Yorkers are leaving. This coming from Michael Goodwin at the New York Post. He says the difference in Albany of the positions is dramatic. Democrat legislative leaders hold most of the cards by virtue of their veto-proof majority. As we were talking earlier, elections have consequences, and when you give this super majority to those in Albany, everything's fair game. What we used to say was that's never going to happen. That's one of those crazy proposals coming out of the city. Now it's not so crazy. Now we're looking at things like taxpayers paying for campaigns, for instance. But their ideas, as usual, says Goodwin, are the most radical. Raise taxes even higher, keep coddling criminals, back to what we've been discussing for the last few weeks, block new charter schools, which is so unfortunate, and spend. Their plans take some of the state's worst policies and maintain them or make them even worse. And we see that with the bail reform and the suggestions to giving judges more discretion, and that's being fought. Something as level-headed as that is being fought by Democrats against the person proposing them, who is also a Democrat, but apparently not far enough left on that issue. At times like this, it seems as if they are double agents, meaning the Democrat Party, being paid to destroy New York. Take the case of Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie. Despite the Post poll showing majorities of Democrats in his Bronx district support tougher anti-crime laws, want more charter schools, Heastie opposes both, yet still gets reelected in a landslide. And that's why I brought up this story specifically. Not necessarily just to keep harping on the budget, but also because when you see, we talk about how good Lee Zeldin did, but still not victorious in the gubernatorial race. When you see these radical proposals being pushed in Albany, and these people keep getting reelected by landslides, and it makes it very difficult when you hear so many of us complain, and it seems like, well, we're in New York and we keep voting, mostly the city, voting for the same people that are doing this to us. Not the good one. We're voting for, you and I are voting for the people that are trying to cut back spending, trying to go after criminals. But it's very tough to overcome that power in the city. Now, I know in the past there's been a lot of groups that have tried to separate the state. I don't know where that's going, but I don't see how someone like Hasty, or I don't see how someone like Hochul gets reelected, and then we wonder why things haven't changed. But we have to take another short break, and then we're going to wrap up today's show. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. I know there's our contact information if you have any charitable groups that you want to send us your fundraiser information. If you know someone that would like to be a guest because they're running for something, or, again, a part of a charity, just let me know. There's the best place to reach me. I wanted to end on a good note because I put Brooks Baker, our guest, the Steuben County District Attorney, on the spot. I said, well, good news, and sometimes it's difficult to come up with. So I saw this in our news yesterday, and this is coming from our friend Assemblyman Phil Palmisano's office. Let's see. There it is. There's Phil celebrating 2023 agricultural literacy. This was not a time of the year that I was familiar with, but Phil read the book Tomatoes for Neela during New York Agricultural Literacy Week, which was March 20th to the 24th. And this was to a classroom of second graders who, going back to that picture, seemed to be enjoying themselves. And each student, just to make it more special, were able to plant tomatoes and basil that they will watch, grow, and learn how long it takes for these plants to germinate. This is from Cornell Cooperative Extension that does this. And that's Cornell Cooperative Extension of Steuben. They deliver the annual agricultural themed book to Steuben County schools and community libraries each year to celebrate this week. Volunteers throughout the county, not the country, throughout the county, like Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, members of the Bath and and Corning Rotaries, they read to these students. I thought that was a kind of a fun story and a positive story to end on. Finishing up here, agricultural literacy is understanding and being able to communicate the source and value of agriculture and how it affects our daily lives. And I found this fascinating. Over 50% of the land in Steuben County is considered agricultural, as we are considered a leading county for more farms than most. There you go. See, we can end on a positive note here in New York. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again to Brooks Baker for being our guest, the Steuben County District Attorney. We have Congressman Tom Reed, former Congressman Tom Reed, on the program tomorrow. So make sure that you join us. This has been Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I hope you'll join us tomorrow morning, bright and early, starting at 7. Have a great day.